Loki episode 4.
Top 2 deaths in one episode
Wow.
of
Just
just
wow.
MCU, I feel.
Yeah.
Like, 1 for shock factor, 2 for just, like, visual factor as well.
Yeah. So we had a couple of parallel stories in this episode.
Yeah,
So we had Miss Minutes and Ravona.
yeah. Oh my god, you
We'll
made
say
me.
Ravona. Um they were Miss Minutes had showed her the citadel at the end of time
Yeah,
where He Who Remains was dead. She then showed her a memory from before she had her mind wiped of how she had been instrumental in winning the Time War.
yeah,
And then he had wiped her mind so that she could just run the TVA for him while he sat in his ivory tower, so to speak.
yeah,
Then we also had Victor Timely arriving at the TVA,
yeah.
unsure of what was going on. And we always knew these things were going to come to a head eventually.
Mm.
My gosh, did they not waste time though?
Yeah. They really haven't let off the gas. And that's a
No.
good, like, we've said, like, pretty much every week, we're worried that while, yes, at the moment, the pacing's feeling great, they're not letting off the gas. Like, there's all these things that are keeping them to have to keep the pace going. We were worried at some point something was going to, like, we're waiting for their mess up, really.
Yeah.
But, like, no,
And
they,
right now we're in a good spot. They
mm,
can absolutely leave themselves in a hole at the end of episode 5 though.
yeah,
They've got 2 episodes to explain what happens after what we've seen at the end of episode 4,
mm-hmm,
and they can do that in 2 episodes. But if
mm-hmm,
they try and spin off too much stuff in this episode, they're not going
mm.
to have enough time to close it up nicely, and we might be back to square one of
I,
you've done your pacing well and then fucked it.
I've, so, I mean, let's just, we'll get into everything, but let's just talk the ending. What I was thinking was going to be the end of episode 6, where it all goes wrong, the loom explodes, and that's where we're ended. We got it in episode 4, which I honestly
Yeah.
wasn't expecting. Like,
So the common consensus on the internet seems to be that the loop exploding probably means the loop has reset.
possibly.
So does that restore the sacred timeline? Or does it restore the first stable timeline it can find?
See, I have a different theory on what's going to happen.
Okay.
My thought isn't that it's like, it's essentially the loop resetting, but I don't think it now becomes like a singular timeline becomes the main. I think what we were seeing is all these timeline branches forced into one single, like, straight path forward. And I know this isn't like MCU canon, but the Spider Verse is all a web, and everything is connected in different ways. What if the actual way the timelines all ever were was all just a mess, jumbled, going all over the place? The loom was them forcing it into a thing. It exploding just sets things back to the natural course, which is all these timelines just weave in and out. It's all just like a
Mm.
general mess. And some timelines come back, some maybe are lost through incursions and different things. But I mean, I think the TVA is going to be gone. And the only way is that the TVA has to be built again. Or maybe it gets saved. Maybe there's some more timeline, like time travel shittery. Um,
The
but
the the bit that's confusing me most
mm,
is the way that the TVA sits outside of time.
yeah,
makes what Loki was doing with the time slipping backwards and forwards in the timeline of the TVA a bit confusing. Um, and it might just be a storytelling purpose that we're not supposed to look into too much. But that also means that somehow the TVA is directly connected to the loop, even if it sits outside it.
Yeah,
Um, so I do just wonder: are we just gonna is the TVA just being reset?
maybe.
So it's gonna come back to like a brand new, freshly built TVA, and they're gonna be a bit like, "What happened?" I'm genuinely curious to see like the direct aftermath of that explosion.
So, I have you seen the trailer for the final 2 episodes?
No, I haven't.
I haven't either, other than a singular clip, which unfortunately I just stumbled upon, and I immediately swiped away before like realizing what it was because I didn't want spoilers. I enjoy not having the trailers because it
Yeah,
spoils potential.
episode trailers were a really weird thing to me.
And the only thing I saw was Loki time slipping,
Oh,
and I have no context and what looked like around him things falling apart, which makes me believe
we're gonna get like a Groundhog Day episode.
I don't know, maybe, but I have a feel like I saw that, and obviously I've been thinking about it now, and discussing this has made me realize with the loom broken, their fix for grounding him again potentially is gone. We thought it was very weird that they fixed it so easily
Yeah,
and that it might come back again. What if it is broken and he time slips and, like you say, we have a Groundhog Day again where he's got to repeat, and maybe he goes back to the meltdown beginning and it's like he stops Victor Timely going and we don't get that brutal death that I'm sorry, but can we talk about how fucking gruesome it was that we saw his
so awesome.
rib cage and skull jaw, like Marvel not holding back.
Yeah,
Also,
spring cheese looking head ass.
I don't think I was not expecting that. Like the door opens and it's just like whap.
Unfortunately, Twitter spoiled that for me. Um,
Oh,
but fucking awesome.
honestly, it's like this build up, and yeah, maybe he goes back and he stops that and it changes the course of things because I saw one thing which was the theory is that Miss Minutes set him up to do that because he wasn't becoming the he who remains they wanted.
But yeah,
She makes a comment as she's being shut down. She is like, I have one more thing to say, and then it glitches and she's got like the one broken eye, and she's like, you will never be him. We know Victor Tamley is very much like wants to prove himself, like the independent. He clearly is very much of I can be the best. That comment then makes him want to be the one to fix it, and she knows that it would destroy him. Like maybe
interesting.
I thought the
I
way Miss
Now that
Minutes
you
got
said the
shut down.
time slipping is back,
Mm.
I can see them doing a Groundhog Day episode,
I also could see something like that.
and it would make sense. And it might leave us in a position where one episode at the end works.
Maybe.
Now,
Mm.
there is a thing that I think a lot of people slipped over because it was disguised as a funny moment and then doesn't have as much physical weight that I think is very important.
Okay.
When Victor Timely met OB,
Yes.
and we get a couple of jokes,
Yep.
and he's like, "Oh, it's like a snake eating its own tail," which is of course like the imagery of Ouroboros, which
Yep.
is his name, and it's very very funny.
Yep.
And he gets turned into a bit of a joke because they're both like fangirling over each other and whatever. But there was a very valid point raised, which we need to discuss
Who
because they
came
were like, okay,
first?
so who originally wrote this? So this is I can't remember what it's officially known as, but it's known as a Mozart paradox to me because of Doctor Who.
Okay.
And Peter Capaldi's Doctor does a whole like segment talking about it, which is so interesting. And basically, I'll explain the story as he tells it.
Mm-hmm.
So, a young boy loves Mozart's music.
Yep.
adores it. It's his favorite music in the whole world. He has all of the sheet music. He spent his life earning loads of money to buy original copies of this sheet music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he discovers time travel.
Okay.
So he goes back in time to
Mm-hmm.
meet Mozart to get him to sign his sheet music.
Got you.
But he can't find Mozart. No one's heard of Mozart. Where is
Mm-hmm.
Mozart? Distraught at the idea that Mozart doesn't exist for whatever reason, and no one can find him,
Mm-hmm.
he writes down the sheet music
Mm-hmm.
so that Mozart's music can live on, so that he doesn't have to live in a world without Mozart's music,
Mm-hmm.
making him Mozart.
Yep.
But who wrote the original sheet music?
Got you.
So that's the concept of the paradox. Yes, we know how it's got here, but that's an infinite loop that's always going to happen. What started it?
So I have a
What if that feeds into the Groundhog Day we might experience in the next episode, and the TVA
possibly.
gets reset at the end of the series, and Loki is left behind the information that OB wrote, that Kang learnt from, that OB learnt from, that Kang learnt from, etc., etc.
So I have my theory. We know that Victor Timely was a character on the Sacred Timeline.
Yep.
He was a kid. Him getting the TVA guidebook branches him off. There is the potential that there is several times he branches off, whether he gets a TVA handbook at a different point in time, lots of things that could branch him off to become Victor Timely. While on what they discussed, it's like OB learns from an inventor called Victor Timely. Victor Timely learns from. It's not necessarily the exact same Victor Timely each time. So in theory, it's not really the loop. It's more OB stays the same, and each time he's getting a new Victor Timely to bounce and learn something slightly different off. And Victor Timely teaches OB something slightly new.
Oh, so you think it's
So
a
it's like,
forged in fire kind of, every time this loop gets reset
yeah,
and Victor Timely gets
oh,
triggered, they learn a little bit more and it builds up over
yeah,
tens of thousands of
yes.
cycles.
I feel like
Interesting.
maybe OB's the central thing, and he's just interacted with I don't know, 100 Victor Timely's over the years, and all that information. Like each time they've built the TVA together, OB's kept all this information, which is why he's always written the handbook, because he's like the central knowledge of
I
it.
I get that, but did we not come to the conclusion that OB couldn't have had his mind wiped?
Well,
And
it depends.
he didn't
So,
recognize the person other than as a
well,
picture in his
we
book.
thought he had hasn't had his mind, but maybe he hasn't. Maybe his mind, because you've got to think he who remains wiped everyone's memory. Doesn't, and we presumed Obi didn't because he got forgotten.
Well, he kind of had his mind wiped because he
Then, well,
remembers
yeah,
the discussion with Loki,
yes,
and everyone had their mind wiped in between the path Loki was skipping to.
but I think it's a situation of Obi's been there for as the central person without his mind wiped. If you think he's been there for who fucking knows, however, a thousand, hasn't aged, they don't age there or something. It's that's years of knowledge. We know that from his experience with Loki, he was forgetting what Loki had told him till Mobius prompted him, and he's like, "Oh wait, no, I do remember that." Maybe it's a situation he was like, "Oh, I remember well, I built this with an inventor called Victor Timely." And it's only then Victor Timely going, "That's me," prompts this. Wait, that is you, and brings
I
those
don't
memories
know.
back. Maybe.
I lean more into the idea that he's called Ouroboros because he is a paradox. He is
Mm,
a living, breathing paradox, and
yeah,
that's why the TVA actually works. It runs on paradoxes.
yeah.
Um, but I'm really curious, and I think that little interaction where they're like, well, so who really wrote the information
Mm,
then? I think that's going to end up being like a plot point at the end. And I think it's actually going to be Loki ends up leaving the book behind, which won't fix the paradox because it'd be like, well, Loki doesn't know that stuff. So where did it come for before Loki? But that's going to be how they have the information in a new loop.
maybe.
But it's such an interesting situation to be in. I don't think anyone expected Victor to die in such a way
Yeah.
and then the loop to get reset.
Well, yeah,
And
we
that's crazy because we've not even discussed what Ravona and Miss Minutes were getting onto.
well, yeah, there was and like I just wanted to point out, I called the whole deal with Miss Minutes was just restarting her.
Yeah,
I
you
said they just
absolutely did.
maybe they can just like reboot
Just turn
her,
her off and on again. Yeah,
and that's literally what they had to do. That shutdown was very cool in the visuals of how they did it. Like her kind of reverting to like a super simple like ASCII style clock,
yeah,
and then like the zeros and ones like binary as she's being shut down. Also, Miss Minutes is the evilest fucking character. Her
100%.
watching the cube crush
With that
those like
smile was sickening.
yes, which also was another death that we didn't visually see, but it was bad enough not having to like you could the sounds they did with the cube killing off the
Yeah.
rebels, we'll call them.
So you had Ravona and Miss Minutes convince themselves they don't need He Who Remains.
Yeah,
They don't need Kang at all. They can do it because Ravona basically did it last time.
yeah.
So Miss Minutes once
Which
again is just trying to hitch her wagon to the most powerful person.
she's just manipulating things, which I actually think
100%.
is her playing things to try and get a better Kang back.
100%. Um, and the idea is they're going to build an army to win against whoever comes for our universe, our
Yeah,
timeline, and then they will re-establish the TVA in their image and do what He Who Remains was doing. But it'll
yeah.
be them this time, so it's okay. Um, so the first thing they do is naturally go to the prison cell that has the people who pruned all them
Hmm.
branches and are sacred timeline till we die heretic people, and they're like, "Do you want to join our army?" Unfortunately for them, they turned up just after B-15 had gone in
Yeah,
and explained why they should help the new TVA,
yeah.
and they'd started to kind of come round to the idea.
Basically made them realize that your whole thing is you care about protecting the TVA. If you actually give a shit about protecting the TVA, you will help us to keep the TVA alive. And it's
Yeah,
like Miss Minutes and Ravona just too late, where that kind of had already swayed in that way.
yeah. Um,
So
so you get the one guy who'd made a life for himself on the
B5,
sacred timeline, decide that he would stand with Ravona, and the rest were like, "No, fuck you."
what a
So
little
then the
shit.
cube we got teased in episode 2,
203, yeah.
um, that was kind of creepy and scary, and they make it smaller. Then had like 15 prisoners put in it.
Hmm.
And I think the most harrowing part of that is the fact it cuts away from it.
Yes. It doesn't show us, but you
Yeah,
hear
all
it.
you see Ravona and Miss Minutes, and you just hear the crunching and the screaming, but
The
like these muffled screams
squelch.
because of how gross.
Yeah,
And then you just see Ravona kind of a bit steely faced and a little bit like, oh, that's a bit grim.
yeah.
You got B5, no, sorry,
Who
X5,
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 who can't
who's like,
look. Well,
yeah,
he just
and
won't look.
and then you got Miss Minutes fucking, hey, this is
Yeah.
good,
Yeah, like
fucking psychotic ass clock.
honestly. And something else, like we watched X5 in it, and it's like it was bad enough watching, like, imagine being squished by a cube. Don't forget, he was just had the cube squishing him. Imagine those like 20 people, you are being squished against someone else.
Yeah.
And it's just
And the bones won't crush straight away. They'll
a
protrude and
snap.
then crush. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
horrific. Horrific.
Horrific. Um,
I would kind of like to see a rated R version though and see how they animate what was actually happening in the box.
I think it'd just become like it'd just be red.
I'm a red pile of goop.
Well, it'd just be like a red mist on it all, and then it would just, I presume, I don't know if liquid stays in it. Like, can it hold liquid? Does it all just
Well, I
start
mean,
dripping out the bottom?
if you put enough pressure on liquid, it will become a gas. No,
I don't know,
maybe. Who
but
knows?
yeah. Then you get X5, obviously, uh, on the well. Oh no, he's watching over. He goes to get Victor.
Yeah, they kidnap Victor when he goes to see the hot cocoa machine.
Yeah, the obsession
Um,
over a machine that makes hot cocoa.
yeah. I mean, I get it.
Yeah,
Hot chocolate is lit.
I just like the
Um,
fact that the TVA is sustained on just hot cocoa and key lime pie.
yeah.
That's-
That key lime pie still looks really good. Like,
yeah,
um, the real big thing as well though is with the timeline blowing up, is Ravonna still going to be like pruned? Because previous, like we found out when you prune someone, they were going to that place at the end of time,
well, that's the thing. Ravonna gets sent there.
which is outside the timeline.
Yeah,
So is she going to
she
find a big red
knows
button to
how that.
reset everything?
Well, she knows. I wonder if she just makes her way to his lighthouse thing
Yeah,
because she knows the creature thing that's there because I imagine she put it there with He Who Remains
but
to
does she
protect that
remember it?
place. Don't know. Maybe not. But I imagine she knows how to get back up to the. So I think she maybe ends up there, whether she's trapped there. Maybe she's just trapped there now.
Yeah.
Miss Minutes obviously
It,
gets reset.
I do wonder if Ravonna potentially has to reset the timeline because she's now outside of the loop. Maybe she can hit a
Maybe.
big red reset button.
Maybe.
I won't be surprised if we potentially get maybe like a story of Loki doing a Groundhog Day and a B story of Ravonna trying to work out if there's any way she can reset the timeline. Um,
Possibly. There is also like the thing we haven't talked about, which is from episode 1 when we saw Loki running through and he gets pruned. And we're like, oh shit,
yeah,
someone pruned him and that saved the situation.
it
I
was
don't know
Loki.
why I didn't expect it to just be Loki. Like when I realized they were very smart with it. So everything's melting down. And then when it cuts to like the next scene, he's holding the time. And I was like, hang on, this is cut back to Loki from episode 1. And then I'm like, oh shit. So it is
There
the
was a
same.
meltdown when he slipped to the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, so it was this meltdown, not like a different one. Um, so I was like, okay, Loki's gonna prune himself. He's gonna like with a one. I'd forgot about the phone ringing and stuff. And obviously Sylvie being there, I was like, oh, this all makes sense now why she was there and why he was so like the phone call of it being Obi and it's just like, hey, you okay? It's like, what? Like he's like, well, you're taking your time. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm trying. And then they both want him to turn off the powers. I enjoyed X5 being like Sylvie.
yeah.
Oh, because he got mind controlled. Uh
It was. There was a lot to digest, and I'm genuinely curious to see how a lot of it shakes out, and if they can competently deal with it in 2 episodes. I definitely see a world where they can, but I'm not confident they do.
I am still of the opinion. I think things get. I think the TVA gets destroyed, and I don't think we get. I think the reset gets broken, and the TVA doesn't get reset, sort of thing. I think the loop gets broken.
I am inclined to disagree with you, but not from anything we've seen in Loki, but rather the leaks that are coming out on the timeline, which we'll discuss in the news segment.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's one of them times where I'd probably completely agree with you, if not for stuff getting leaked on the timeline about overarching rumors and plans.
Yeah. I just
But
I wonder if it then opens things up to be
yes, quite
interesting.
possibly.